when I look at the Michigan Wolverines, there are a lot of storylines heading into the 2024 season. You have sort of the familiar storyline of any defending national champion, which is, how are they going to follow that up, right? Are they going to be able to keep the same amount of drive and dedication and all that coming off a national title that they had for all of those years leading up to the national title? And you hear that about every single team that ever wins a national title. How are they going to, what's the encore to winning a national title? How are they going to handle being sort of on the top of the mountain, right? And then you've got, of course, the Jim Harbaugh situation. He's gone along with the majority of the defensive coaching staff. The majority of the offensive coaching staff has stayed behind. Of course, Sharon Moore has been promoted to head coach. You've got the new look Big Ten, and how does Michigan fit in with that now that we're, no longer playing divisions within the Big Ten, and they're adding the 4 West Coast teams, Oregon, Washington, Southern Cal, and UCLA. And do they play 3 of those? Yeah, they play Southern Cal, Washington, and Oregon. So they play 3 of the 4 new teams into the Big Ten. And then you've got kind of the back burner story that may be going on for another year or two that some people care a lot about, some people don't care at all about, but it's the NCAA investigation deal and what's going to end up happening, if anything at all, with the alleged sign stealing stuff from last year. But, that's different stories for different days here. But good morning. It's Uncle Lou here. That's right. It is me, Uncle Lou, live on LouTube for you. Thanks for watching. I really appreciate it also. And this is the official 2024 Michigan Wolverines 2024 college football schedule prediction. I'm going to go through every single game on Michigan's schedule, and I'm going to give you a winner and a loser for every single one. We'll talk a little bit about Michigan's team, what they got coming back. Already mentioned the coaching situation. We'll take a look at their recruiting, who they added through the transfer portal, returning production from last year, all those kinds of things. Then we'll throw the schedule up on the screen. We'll go through it, and we'll try to see what type of season Michigan can have following up their 15-0 season from last year. This Detroit hat is the best I'm going to be able to do for you in terms of the Michigan deal. No, this is not a Detroit Tigers hat. I don't care about baseball. This is just a Detroit hat. So let's try to keep that in mind if we can. But, all right, on to Michigan. Shout out Nizzy B, by the way. Nizzy B over on my Patreon page suggested that I do this Michigan preview and prediction video. So, Nizzy, this one's for you, buddy. I really appreciate you helping to support the show and the channel over on the Uncle Lou Patreon page. If you're a member on my Patreon page, make sure you head over there. There's a post. You'll see it. It's the first post on the page when you get over there about these prediction videos. Leave a comment up underneath that post letting me know what team you want to see me do a preview and a prediction for. Every day when I get ready to sit down and do these videos, first thing I do is head over to my Patreon page and I just pick a team off the list. So Nizzy B, today's your lucky day. It is going to be the Michigan Wolverines. The link to the Patreon page is in the description of the video, by the way, if you want to check it out. All right, 15-0 last year, won the Big Ten for the 3rd year in a row, made the playoffs for the 3rd year in a row, beat Ohio State for the 3rd year in a row, and won the national championship. That's Michigan last year in a nutshell, right? Capped off by the national title, which was great. But this wasn't a one-year run. It was, a one-year run in terms of they, have currently won only one national title in a row. But this was a really a 3 or 4 year process. Started kind of during the COVID year. Coming out of that, they've made the playoffs every single year, 21, 22, and 23. Now, a lot of pressure on Jim Harbaugh, Michigan, and J.J. McCarthy, last year's quarterback, entering last season, to sort of get over the hump, which sounds weird because here's the thing. There's almost always another hump, right? What do we hear about Michigan forever? Well, they got to get over the hump. What's the hump? They got to beat Ohio State, win the Big Ten. They do that. They make the playoffs 2 years in a row, but they get bounced in the first round. And we say, well, they got to get over the hump. Oh, yeah? What hump? But they got to win a playoff game. Well, last year they got over every hump imaginable. They got over the NCAA. They got over their own school suspending their head coach. They got over their own conference suspending their head coach. They got over Ohio State. They got over the Big Ten. They got over a first-round playoff win, knocking off Washington in the national title game and winning it all at 15-0. So that's their season last year, of course, in a nutshell. Offseason comes, Harbaugh bolts to the NFL, Sharon Moore promoted from within. Now, he's never been a head coach before, not officially, but of course, he's been a stand-in head coach multiple times. Just mentioned Michigan having to beat not only the teams on their schedule last year, but also having to beat their own administration in terms of Harbaugh being suspended in the beginning of the year. He was then suspended at the end of the year by his own conference, the NCAA, breathing down their neck the whole time. Sharon Moore was the guy that stepped in every time Jim Harbaugh got suspended. And it's hard to believe, but Jim Harbaugh was suspended for half of Michigan's regular season games last year. He was suspended for the first 3 games. He was suspended for the last 3. Now, the first three didn't matter for reasons we'll talk about in a minute when we get ready to look at the schedule. The last three definitely mattered. And Sherrone Moore did a good job. Now, it's kind of like an analogy I would use would be, let's say you're the backup quarterback, right? Yeah, you know that, technically something might happen and you get kind of thrown into the fire and you have to play. So you try to prepare the best you can. But you don't really expect that to happen, right? So you go to bed every night. There's not a lot of stress on you, not a lot of anxiety, not a lot of pressure, that kind of thing. The game starts, something happens. You don't even have time to think. You're just in there, right? It's just instinct. You just, boom, you're in the game. That's sort of what happened with Sherrone Moore, right? It's totally different going to bed every night knowing that you're the starting quarterback or knowing that you're the head coach. And by the time the season rolls around, Sherrone Moore will have had 9 months worth of sleep where he's got to lay his head on his pillow every night knowing that he's the head man now at Michigan. And that is a different set of pressure than what he faced last year. I'm not saying that to say that that means he's going to be a bad head coach. I just don't think that because Michigan was 6-0 with him as an interim coach last year, I don't actually think that means much of anything in terms of projecting what he'll do as a head coach. I'm not saying that means he'll be great, and I'm not saying that means he'll be bad. I don't think that that really factors in at all. Just my 2 cents worth. Maybe he turns out to be a great coach. Maybe he doesn't. I don't think it'll have anything to do with the fact that he had to step in as interim coach a few times last year while Harbaugh was suspended. Let's talk about Michigan's talent. Now, they've been one of the most talented teams in the country, top 15, top 20 talent for a long, long time. They recruit really, really well. Last year, according to 24/7, and again, for all of these numbers, I'm going to use 24/7, not because I think they're the best, not because I think they're better than any other certain service or another. I've just always used 24/7 out of habit, and so I try to always use it so I can be consistent when comparing from team to team. In other words, it wouldn't be fair when I did the Nebraska video a couple of days ago if I used On3 to rate Nebraska's talent or recruiting classes or whatever, but then used 24/7 to rate Michigan and then used ESPN to rate Texas A&M, whatever. So I just used the same one. It's 24/7. So if you want to quote something down below from a different service that says they're better or worse in any of these areas than what I'm telling you here, that's fine. I'm not even going to argue with you. I just use 24/7 for consistency purposes. That's it. According to 24/7, Michigan was the 14th most talented team in the country last year. Now, they just evaluate that roster top to bottom. Every player has a grade. They get a recruiting grade, everything else coming out of high school, and then you add all that up on your roster, and that gives you an overall number for your talent index. Michigan was 14th. How did they get to that? Well, recruiting and portal, right? Two primary ways you're adding players today. How do they recruit? Well, this recruiting class that just ended, the cycle that just ended, to me, it was interesting. Michigan's coming off arguably their best 3-year run in 50 years. Back-to-back Big Ten titles, 3 wins in a row over Ohio State, 3 straight trips to the playoffs, and a national title over the last 3 years. And their recruiting class finished 16th. Not bad. I mean, that's a really good recruiting class. And as we see, you can win a national title with top 20 talent. Michigan won a national title last year with the 14th most talented team. So I'm not here to tell you that's a bad recruiting class. I'm just a little bit surprised it wasn't a little bit higher given the momentum that they have over the last 2 or 3 years. I mean, they get to knock on every recruit's door and tell them, hey, we beat Ohio State 3 years in a row. We've won the conference 3 years in a row. We've been to the playoffs 3 years in a row. We just won the national title and went 15-0. I just would have thought that would have been reflected more in this year's recruiting class. Again, not to say that 16 is a bad recruiting class. It's not. You look at their previous recruiting classes leading up to that. The year before, they were 17th. The year before that, they were 9th. The year before that, they were 13th. The year before that, they were 10th. So they've been between 10 and 17 nationally in recruiting each of the 5 cycles. They're supplementing that with the portal, right? Bringing players in through the transfer portal. Not a great portal class this year. Now, they brought in 9 players, but that was good for 54th in the country in terms of portal class rankings for this year. They brought in 9 players, 1 4-star, 8 3-stars. You compare that to the previous year where they also brought in only 9 players, but they had the 17th ranked recruiting class. Again, both years they brought in 9 players. This current class, 54th in the country, Last year's class, again, 9 players, 17th in the country. That's because they brought in 6 4-stars in the last class and only 3 3-stars. Again, this year, 1 4-star, 8 3-stars. Now, again, I'm not here to tell you that these 3-stars aren't any good and the 4-stars. These are just the numbers. That's it, okay? Some of these players are going to be great. Some of them are going to start. Some of them are going to play a lot. Some of them are never going to play it down and probably going to enter the transfer portal again before their college career is over. Michigan's no different than any other team in that regard, but those are their portal numbers over the last couple of years. Last year, that got them to the 14th most talented roster in the country. Again, all those numbers come from 24/7. Let's talk about what's probably a more important number heading into this season for Michigan, which is returning production. And this is an alarming stat. And I, look, the last thing I ever want to do is work for one of these big corporate media deals. But one thing I am jealous of these people, Josh Pate or whoever else that works for, Josh Pate works for CBS, or these people that work for Fox or ESPN or whatever. They got a whole team of people that can look this shit up. When it comes to returning production, I would be curious to know what team that has won the national title in a year had the lowest percentage of returning production versus the year before, right? You hear these numbers returning production all the time. Michigan's 128th in the country this coming year in returning production. They return they return 36% of their production from last year. So basically 2/3 of their production is gone. 24% returns on offense, 47% returns on defense. And of course, they lost McCarthy and Blake Corum to the NFL. Donovan Edwards is still there at running back, and they return about half of their defense. So 128th, 36% returning production. That number, 36%. I wonder, what's the lowest number that has won a national title over the last few years? I wish I had somebody that could look that up for me. If anybody in the comments wants to look it up or knows, let me know. But like, you look at last year's Michigan team that won the national title, right? What was the talk? What was everyone talking about when it came to Michigan heading into last season? Besides they've been to the playoffs twice in a row and they've yet to win a playoff game. They got to get over the hump. Besides that, what was it? It was, wow, they talked all these people into coming back for an additional year. I don't know what Michigan's returning production was heading into last season, but it was way higher than 36%. Way higher. You get people like J.J. McCarthy to come back, a couple of those defensive studs that chose to come back, even the running back Blake Corum. I mean, all these people that came back from the previous year, their returning production was much higher the year before that. Georgia, who won the national title each of the 2 years before, you look at their first one in 21, a bunch of those defensive guys that could have gone pro at the end of the 2020 season chose to come back in 2021. And we all kind of, if you remember that season, that Georgia, the 21 Georgia defense was one of the best we've ever seen. And the returning production from the year before was a big reason why. The following year, when they won the national title in 2022, it was sort of the opposite. They got a ton of offensive players to come back. Stetson Bennett, some of those other guys, some of the running backs, of course, Brock Bowers, who was a junior. But so you had a ton of returning production for Michigan last year when they won it all, ton for Georgia when they won it all in 21 and 22. LSU, now, they brought in Joe Burrow, but he had been there the year before in 2018 when they won it in 2019. Anyway, just something I thought about when I saw these returning production numbers for Michigan. But 128th in the country in returning production. They only returned 36% of their total production from last year, 24% on offense, 47% on defense. Vegas odds. What do the people in the desert that put these numbers out think about Michigan's chances for 2024? Well, their win total, which is the projected number of wins for Michigan, currently sits at 9. Now, this is a betting number. Keep that in mind. So this just means that, when people go and want to bet on how many games they think Michigan's going to win, they bet over 9 or under 9. So you bet over 9, Michigan's got to go 10-2 for you to win the bet. If you bet under 9, 8-4 or worse, right? That's just a betting number. So 9 wins, the expected, which would be a bit of a drop off, 12-0 last year, 15-0 after the national title. And this is a regular season win total. So of the 12 regular season games, they're expected to win 9 of them. What are their chances to win a national title? 10th. Not bad. 10th best odds to win a national title, according to the people in Vegas. That's plus 2,500. Those are the exact same odds as Notre Dame and Penn State. So whatever you happen to think about Notre Dame and Penn State, the people in Vegas view Michigan in a similar light, at least in terms of their ability to win a national title. What about winning the Big Ten for what would be the 4th year in a row? 4th best odds to win the Big Ten. They're behind, of course, Ohio State, Oregon, and Penn State. They're plus 600 right now to win the Big Ten. That's fourth place. Penn State is right ahead of them. Southern Cal right behind them. So, Oregon, Ohio State, Penn State, Michigan, Southern Cal. Playoffs. What are Michigan's chances of making the playoffs? Maybe we have an expanded 12-team playoff this year. According to the people in Vegas, they are a favorite to make the playoffs. They have minus 120 odds to make the playoffs. That means there's a better chance they do make it than they don't. I've talked about this in a couple of videos. There's a lot of things that are interesting to me about this coming up playoff structure, the home playoff games, the first round buys for the top four seeds. One of the things I'm most interested in seeing is how is the playoff committee going to judge these 9-3 and 10-2 teams, right? Let's say Michigan goes 9-3. Could they get into the playoffs with that? Well, maybe. I think it's going to depend who they lose to, who they beat, what everyone else's record is, that kind of thing. 10-2. I think if they go 10-2, they're almost definitely in. But it's going to be interesting to see how many, if any, 9-3 teams get in versus how many 10-2 teams get in or don't get in. Will there be some 9-3 teams that get in and some 10-2 teams that don't? Probably. I don't want to get into a whole deal about the ACC and the Big 12 because the ACC in particular, the Florida State, man, they're still riled up about it. But who would you put in, a 10-2 Michigan, or would you put in a 9-3 Michigan or a 10-2 NC State? It's going to be interesting. People are going to be crying again when the playoff committee makes their final selections in December, I'm sure. All right, let's put Michigan's schedule up on the screen right here. I'm going to go through it game by game and give you a winner and a loser for every single week. Now, before I start with this schedule here, Michigan plays Texas in week 2. Huge non-con Power 5 matchup, right, in Ann Arbor. How many Power 5 teams has Michigan played in the regular season, in the non-con, in the last 4 years, not including this year? So leading up to this year, the 4 prior seasons, how many Power 5 non-con games has Michigan played in the regular season? 1. Last year, 2023, they played 0 Power 5 non-con opponents. They played ECU, UNLV, and Bowling Green. The year before, 2022, 0 non-con Power 5 opponents in the regular season. They played Colorado State, Hawaii, and UConn. Michigan's 6 non-con opponents in the last 2 seasons were UConn, Hawaii, Colorado State, Bowling Green, UNLV, and ECU. You can type till your fingers fall off about, well, Alabama played this team and Georgia played that team and this team. All of those teams played Power 5 opponents in the regular season. Except Michigan. The year before that, 2021, they played 1 Power 5 opponent, Washington. The year before that, of course, was the COVID season of 2020. They played 0. So in the last 4 seasons, Michigan has played 1 Power 5 non-con opponent in the regular season. That was Washington in 2021. You can see that ends this year. So when I take a look at this year's schedule, that's the first thing that sticks out to me, that home game against Texas. The second thing that sticks out to me, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 games in a row at home to start the season. That's great news for a young and inexperienced offense. And that's what we have here. I told you when we talked about returning production. Not a lot of returning production. 24% returning production on offense. Brand new quarterback. One of the running backs is gone. A couple of offensive linemen gone. They got a lot of pieces to fix and replace on there. Starting off with 5 straight home games, obviously much better than the opposite. 5 road games. So 5 games at home in a row to start the season. That stands out. They play 3 of the 4 new teams into the league. That jumps out to me. You see the at Washington game in the first half of the season, home against Southern Cal in the first half of the season, and then in the second half of the season, you see a home game against Oregon. What else jumps out? Difficult road games. Well, you can't look at a Michigan schedule without immediately looking to the Ohio State game. They play on the road in Columbus this year. Now, obviously, they beat Ohio State in Columbus the last time they played there, so wasn't an issue then. We'll see about this year. I'll give you my prediction on that game here in a few minutes. But the other road games seem pretty manageable. There's only 4 road games here. At Washington, I know they were really good last year, but they lost their entire coaching staff, and 21 of their 22 starters are gone, either through graduation, NFL draft, or transfer portal. I think Washington is going to be a lot like TCU was a couple of years ago. TCU has an amazing run. They make it to the national title game and lose the following year, which was last year, becomes kind of a forgettable season. Unfortunately, I think that's the direction Washington is headed. At Illinois, a losing record last year. At Indiana, a first-year head coach and a losing record last year. And then you have the at Ohio State game, which is clearly a very difficult game. But 3 of your 4 road games, very manageable. All right, let's go through the schedule. I'll give you a winner and a loser for every single one. There was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 games on here that when I looked at this schedule, I immediately said that's a win. I don't see any way possible, even if Michigan suffers a couple of injuries along the way, I see no way possible they lose any of these 5 games. Arkansas State, Minnesota, Michigan State, Indiana, and Northwestern. Arkansas State, Butch Jones, Lyle, shout out, 5-star heart in that. No business competing with Michigan. Michigan will get a win there no matter what. Minnesota, 6-7 last year. Look, and don't even come in with the PJ Fleck. I like PJ. Look, PJ Fleck's a nice guy. He's a decent coach. Once every 4 or 5 years, he wins 9 or 10 games. That was when we had a Big Ten West that was absolutely horrendous. And he didn't have to worry about being better than Ohio State or Penn State or Michigan. Those days are gone. If you think Minnesota's making the Big Ten title game anytime in the next few years, I don't know what to tell you. You're out of your gourd. It's not happening. Sorry, it's not. Michigan will get that win there. Nothing against Pete. I don't have no PJ Fleck hate. This is just reality. The days of being able to win a weak division so that you can get your ass beat by Ohio State or Michigan, those days are over, okay? Michigan will beat Minnesota. Michigan State. Again, starting over. Again, I like the coach, Jonathan Smith. I think he will improve Michigan State. Not this year. Maybe a little bit this year, but not enough to beat Michigan. I know it's a rivalry game. Don't care. Michigan will win that one. At Indiana, another team was absolutely horrendous last year. New coach. Maybe they get better. Not better enough to beat Michigan. And Northwestern. See, everything I said about Minnesota, just apply that to Northwestern. That's pretty much exactly how I feel. They got a new coach there because they ran the other one off because of the dingling car wash. Whatever the hell, the hazing shit they had going on there. But anyway, so those are 5 games. Right off the top of my head, I go Michigan's winning those no matter what. Now let's start at the top and go through it. Fresno State. Fresno State was 2-0 against Power 5 teams last year. Now, those Power 5 teams were terrible. It's Arizona State and I forget who the other one was. Those two, Purdue. It was Arizona State, Purdue. Terrible, just horrible Power 5 teams. But this will be Fresno State's Super Bowl. I guarantee you they are every single day from the time last season until the time this game kicks off, their coaching staff and players have been doing and thinking nothing but Michigan. Okay? I don't think it'll be enough. I think Michigan will get the win. And this won't be a game that gets talked about a lot, I don't think, in the offseason or the week leading up to this game because of all the other big matchups we have in week 0 and week 1 of the college football season. Plus, you got the game the following week with Texas that everybody's going to be talking about. But this is a sneaky game here. If you were to take this game, okay, so Fresno State week 1, Texas week 2. What if Fresno State was week 6 and Texas was week 7? Then that's a situation where a team like Fresno State could beat you. They sneak up on you, catch you not paying attention in the middle of the season. I don't think that happens here game 1. I think Michigan will come out at home and win the game. I'll be curious to see who starts at quarterback here like everybody else will. I'm not that big of a fan of Alex Orji when it comes to playing the position of quarterback. I watched him a lot last year when they would put him in. I watched the Michigan spring game this year. He appears to really struggle to throw the ball to me. I'm not an expert. I just watch what I see and form an opinion. And he to me, it looks like he looks like a less talented version of Jalen Milroe. Like, I think Jalen Milroe throws the ball better than Alex Orji. And Jalen Milroe can't throw the ball. Now, he can run around. He can make a lot of plays with his legs. And that'll be enough to beat a team like Fresno State. Is that going to be enough to beat Southern Cal, Oregon, Ohio State? You're going to have to be able I think you're going to have to throw the ball a little. Anyway, we're getting ahead of ourselves. I like the other guy that played in the spring game. Warren, is that his name? Drawing a blank on his name now. I don't know which way they're going to go with the quarterback situation, but, I think it's worth keeping an eye on this week 1 Michigan game to see what they decide to do with the quarterback position. If they go with Orji, does he play the whole game? Do they give the other guys a shot? We'll see. But either way, I think Michigan gets a win. They start the season off 1-0. Then we got the big non-con game at home against Texas. Everything that Michigan lost heading into this season, Texas keeps. Texas keeps their quarterback. They keep their coaching staff. They keep their offensive staff. Now, they lost some wide receivers, but they brought some more in. Isaiah Bond from Bama. They've recruited well across the board. They've got a really good offensive line. They've got to tighten up some areas defensively, but to be honest, I just don't know if Michigan has what it takes to exploit any potential Texas weaknesses on defense. Their secondary has been a weak point, kind of, if you want to say they have a weak. Look, when you're talking about teams like Michigan, Texas, Georgia, Bama, Ohio State, whatever these teams, and you're talking about their weaknesses, I'm not saying that means they're bad, okay? I mean, these are the cream of the crop when it comes to college football recruiting and talent levels and depth and all that kind of thing. So I'm not trying to crap on Texas secondary, but I'm just saying if you look at Texas and you want to find a potential weakness if you're an opposing offensive coordinator or something, maybe you target the secondary. I don't know that Michigan can do that early in the season. I don't know that they've got the weapons on the outside, and particularly if Alex Orji is the quarterback, I don't know if they've got the quarterback to do it. It is a home game for Michigan. That's the only advantage I see here, though. Michigan's got a really good defense. One of the best in the country last year, will probably be one of the best in the country again this coming season. But Texas has a veteran quarterback in Quinn Ewers. They've got a head coach that's played or coached in the biggest games on the planet, right? Whether you're talking about his time at Alabama as coordinator or now head coach at Texas and playoffs and conference title games and huge regular season games and rivalry games. He's seen it all. Veteran team at Texas. I think Texas goes on the road and gets the win. I think Michigan loses at home to Texas. Already talked about Arkansas State. Think you get a win there. Southern Cal. I think Michigan beats Southern Cal. I think Michigan beats Southern Cal for the same reason they lose to Texas, right? Texas has an experienced returning quarterback. They're going to have weapons on the outside. They've got a good offensive line. Southern Cal, brand new quarterback there. Now, I trust Lincoln Riley when it comes to picking a quarterback and running an offense and things like that, but I question whether even a Lincoln Riley offense in a quarterback's first year is going to have what it takes offensively to go into Ann Arbor and score enough points on that, what I think is going to be really good Michigan defense to win the game. I don't think they can do it. And even if Michigan's offense has sort of sputtered a little early in the season, you play a nobody Fresno State team, maybe you get beat up a little by Texas, you get things right against Arkansas State, another nobody, and then Southern Cal comes into town. Their defense has been horrendous every year Lincoln Riley has been there. Lincoln Riley's defense has been horrendous everywhere he's been, every single year he's been a head coach. I know he's got a new coordinator and he promises he's doing it different this time, and we got a different strength and conditioning program, and we got a new nutritionist, and we got a new this, and we got a new that, and I promise I'm taking it serious now. I've heard that song and dance before. I'm not saying Lincoln Riley can never field a good defense. Maybe he can eventually. I am telling you, I'm not believing it until I see it with my own eyes. And haven't yet to see it with my own eyes. I don't think they're going into Ann Arbor and getting a win. I think Michigan wins that one. They're 3-1. Already said I think you beat Minnesota, put you at 4-1. And then another newcomer into the Big Ten, and your first road game, your first trip outside of Ann Arbor for the 2024 season on the road at Washington. I think you beat them. I think Washington's going to be pretty bad. And they got the coach from Arizona, and he turned them around down there. 10-win team last year. I just don't think they've got the pieces at Arizona or at Washington in year one to compete with Michigan. Michigan goes on the road and beats them. Still just the one loss. You're 5-1 halfway through your season, just in time for your first bye week. Come out of that, another road game on the road at Illinois. Illinois had a good defense a couple of years ago. Last year it regressed. Their offense has been not much really of anything. Brett Bielema there. I don't know of anybody that hates Illinois for any particular reason. They were 5-7 last year. Maybe they're a couple of games better this year. Maybe they're a couple of games worse. In any case, they're not good enough to beat you. You'll get a win on the road at Illinois. I already told you I think you beat in-state rival Michigan State. And now the Oregon game. Now, you get Oregon at home, but Oregon is a really good team. They are loaded. They're absolutely loaded. The only knock I can think of on Oregon is the whole what ain't never won a national title thing. They're as talented as anybody else in the country, period. Dan Lanning has proven in his short time at Oregon that he knows how to fill a roster, not just the starting roles, but the role players, the backups, even the third stringers. He has built that thing to a monstrous level in the 2 or 3 years that he's been there. And I think they are going to be really, really good this coming season. You do get them at home. And this was the toughest game for me to pick on Michigan's schedule because I can see a lot of scenarios playing out here where Michigan wins this game. I can see a lot of scenarios playing out here where Michigan loses this game. Being a home game was a big check mark in Michigan's favor, of course. I just think Oregon's a better team right now. I don't know about Sharon Moore as a head coach. Again, I'm not here to tell you that Dan Lanning is a better head coach than Sharon Moore. I don't know. But I think Dan Lanning is a really, really good head coach. I don't know how good Sharon Moore is. I give the coaching advantage in this game to Oregon. And because you play Michigan State the week before, and Oregon plays a terrible Illinois team, basically a bye week, I think they're in a better spot here. I think they come into Ann Arbor and beat you. I think Michigan takes its second loss at home to Oregon. But if you give me like one mulligan or do-over at the, on Michigan's schedule, it would be this game. This is by far the toughest game for me to pick here. And there's no doubt in my mind I could be wrong about this and Michigan beats them, but I'm going with Oregon to get the win on the road in Ann Arbor. On the road at Indiana, again, I already told you I think you win that one. Second bye week, Northwestern, again, a win. Just, wake me up when they do anything exciting there. And then the game on the road at Ohio State. And even though this is the biggest game of the year every year for Michigan and one of the biggest games of the year in all of college football every single year, especially the last 3 or 4 years, this was not as hard of a game for me to pick this year as the Oregon game was. I think you go on the road to Columbus, Ohio, and get a loss. You beat them 3 years in a row. And look, I've been the first one to point and laugh at Ohio State the minute that game has ended each of the last 3 years. And if you go in there and beat them again, I'll be the first one on the internet again pointing and laughing at them that they lost. I just don't think it happens. They're absolutely loaded to start with. They got a bunch coming back from last year, especially on that defense. I've been talking this whole video about how good Michigan's defense is and could be in 2024. Ohio State's defense could be just as good as or better. They got 2 of the best running backs in the country in Travion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins. They got wide receivers out to Yin Yang. The offensive line, maybe a question or two to be answered there. And of course, the quarterback situation. The Honda McCord experiment didn't really work out. That offense never really got off the ground last year. He's gone. They bring in the guy from Kansas State, Will Howard. Is he going to be better than McCord? Yeah. Is he going to be C.J. Stroud or Justin Fields? No, he's somewhere in between. He's still not that, which is why I think it's important that Ohio State has really decided to develop their defensive side of the ball the last couple of years, because I don't think this is going to be some sort of Ohio State offense that runs up and down the field like we saw C.J. Stroud and Justin Fields do. I think it's going to be a little bit better, maybe even a few rungs better than what we saw last year offensively from Ohio State. But I think the defense is going to be just as good. I think you go into Columbus and get a loss. Clearly, I could be wrong. You beat them 3 years in a row. Congratulations. If I could reach through the camera here and pat you on your little head, I would. I can't. So I'm not. But I think you go to Columbus and lose. If that makes you mad, feel free to rage type or drool into your keyboard or whatever the case. But I've got Michigan at 9-3 for the 2024 season, which might be good enough to get them into the playoffs. Again, it's going to depend what a lot of teams' records are, not just within the Big Ten, but in some other conferences too. How many other 9-3, 10-2 teams are out there? When you look at the SEC, the ACC, and the Big 12, does a 9-3 Michigan get in over the second place Big 12 team if the second place Big 12 team is 10-2? These are the questions I don't have the answer to. I think if you're 9-3 in the world of college football in a 12-team playoff, you are on very thin ice. I think there's a small chance you get in. I think there's a bigger chance you don't. I think if you're 10-2, there's a better chance you do get in and a smaller chance you don't. I think you want to be 10-2 in the age of the 12-team playoff. I think that, if your goal is to make the playoffs, you need to strive for 10-2. I think there'll probably be some 9-3 teams that get in, but I think there'll be more 9-3 teams that don't get in. We'll see what they decide to do with Michigan if my prediction is right and they finish 9-3. Please hit the thumbs up if you enjoyed this video. Believe it or not, I do put a lot of time, effort, and energy into these videos. I know I've never picked a game right. In fact, if you read the comment section, they'll tell you I've never even seen a game. But I do put a lot of time and work into these videos. So please give it a thumbs up. Share it out to your social media if that's something you're into. Subscribe if you're new. Have a good morning.